Thank you, Shubh. Thank you to the Consul General of India for hosting us in this wonderful premises. And thanks to the organizers, Reliance Foundation and ORF, for bringing us all together. We're here to have a discussion on the SDG path so far and also perhaps looking ahead. And as Shubh introduced them, we have a wonderful panel here to discuss this today. Just to set the stage, I think we're speaking, particularly in New York, particularly this week, to a rather, unfortunately, small community of people who care about the SDGs. Many people outside a few square blocks of here would not know what SDG stood for, let alone know why it is so important. But to recap, and Shombi mentioned this earlier, in some ways the SDG was motivated by a very ambitious vision. Because the idea of eliminating poverty while doing so in a sustainable manner is actually something that is within reach. The technology is there, the financing is there in theory, and yet delivery is often found wanting. Many of you here would know the basic details. There's 17 goals, 169 targets, a bewildering 230 indicators. Now, a few pieces of good news before we get into what might be a more sober discussion. On the one hand, it still continues to, the SDGs continue to have a great deal of support from the international community. And that's indicated by the voluntary national reviews that many countries, including India, have done. In fact, I believe 190 out of 193 countries have done voluntary national reviews. The three that haven't are Haiti, Myanmar, and can anyone guess the third? We're in it, yeah, the United States, yes. But beyond that, I think there is a great deal of support. There has been some considerable progress, particularly on electricity delivery, on internet penetration, and the fact, I think, that people have mobile information, that there's been a great deal of reach even to places you would not expect of internet access and other technological capabilities. And we'll be discussing that a little bit. And then finally, also some progress on child mortality and child health. There's been some very meaningful progress there. And East and South Asia particularly have been hitting many more of their goals. But all that being said, they continue to be major challenges. In fact, none of the 17 goals are currently on target, and we only have 5 years left. The fiscal space is also limited for many countries, and I think one of the things I hope we can discuss over the next 45 minutes or so is how to finance some of these ambitious goals. Let me start maybe with Hemang, Jani, at the outset, just because you are with the World Bank. He's a senior advisor to the executive director, has worked, as Shub mentioned, in a number of capacities in the Indian government as well. We had a meeting this summer in Sevilla, Spain, on financing for development, but that is just the latest in a series of discussions on at the multilateral level on how to finance development goals. Maybe if you could talk a little bit, just start us off by where do you see is there a mismatch between, again, what a lot of countries in the global south would like to accomplish, and is the current multilateral development banks delivering? What more could be done in that area?
Sure. Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Dhruva, putting me on the spot and starting with me. But let me first reflect on what you mentioned about the SDGs. And we have heard Dr. Jaishankar and Samir echoing his message that India kept the energy prices on check and on track during last, say, 1 or 2 years. Let me add one more line to it, and I think Shombi, our friend, will agree with it. India is also keeping the world and the SDGs on track for the rest of the world. So whatever SDGs we think by 2030 we are going to achieve, India is going to have a huge contribution to it. Coming to financing for development, of course, money is never enough. But are we going to be able to put enough money on the table? Maybe yes and no both. For example, I can speak of what we are doing at the World Bank. At the World Bank, we are now moving in the direction from providing money to how we enable countries to raise their own money for their own targets. For example, we have taken a very big bet on guarantees. one of our institution called Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency has a target of raising 20 billion in guarantees by 2030. It's a very near-term target. And we have already done, I think, around 7 billion so far. So I think we'll exceed that target a lot. So in terms of putting money on the table for development, I think the world needs to move in that direction. India is already moving in that direction. We have been the largest consumer of guarantees for the bank, still very small portion of our financing. So another aspect that we can learn from India is on the Jan Bhagidari. You can't achieve SDGs by only money or by only providing finance. You also have to have lot of Jan Bhagidari, as we call the people's participation and also the private participation. So what philanthropies are doing in India today on any targets, whether building toilets or whether providing gas cylinders or whether providing water taps, what philanthropies are also doing today, what private sector is doing today is also going to contribute to a lot. So though we are not on track, but I am very hopeful that we will have enough money and we will bring the world on track on SDGs.
Thank you. Actually, that's a good segue to the next person I was going to ask is Hitan Mehta, who's with the British Asian Trust, has worked in a number of capacities and charitable organizations. Obviously, public funding has to be supplemented, and it's beneficial if supplemented by private financing as well. So maybe talk a little bit about the role of public-private partnerships. Are there sort of creative mechanisms that can help fill some of the funding gaps?
Thank you for that. Look, the British Asian Trust is a diaspora-led organization, and an organization, as you can imagine, when you're talking about our diaspora, innovation and entrepreneurship are at the heart of those things. And so one of the big bets that we have taken is around outcomes-based financing. We decided to do this 7 years ago and get involved in this space, and have been able to deploy now, $60 million of funding around this with 40 different partners on the ground. And the big and the key learning for us has been how you build those public-private partnerships in association with government, with private trusts and foundations, and philanthropists, where philanthropy is that patient capital that you need to try and get some of this innovation off the ground, and then working with trusts and foundations who are then able to help you scale this work and bringing in corporate CSR funding within India with this great 2% CSR law, and actually building this off in a way that actually is getting us to scale. So our latest project is called Lifted. We're working with the Reliance Foundation. They're our founding partner on this. And we're working with the likes of Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, the Maitree Trust and others, where we're looking at the issue of foundation literacy and numeracy for 4 million children over the next 4 years. But the way the partnership has worked has been because everyone is invested in the outcome. We're sort of moving away from the idea that let's all start looking at what the activities are, but let's start paying for the results that are being delivered. And actually being able to incentivize those results is actually where we're seeing real difference. And India's got this ecosystem where you can actually try and do these things. That level of innovation, the ability that the civil society has to deliver on the ground in partnership with government is actually unique in its way. And so actually seeing where we might be able to save the world on the SDGs might really be possible.
I want to shift a little bit from sort of more the application side and what we're seeing there, and maybe turn to Gaurav Goel first, who's founder and CEO of Samagra, which is a governance consulting firm based in Mumbai. What are some lessons you've seen from India's experience on the governance side, and then move a little bit more into the grassroots level after that?
Yeah. So thank you, Dhruva, and good morning, everyone. I think if you look back at India's progress on SDGs over the last decade, there are three broad themes that I wanted to touch upon. But before I do that, I also want to share a certain perspective lens, in hindsight, of course, to India's approach to SDGs over the last decade. Right. One way to look at it is what government of India has done well is to, for those ease of living related parameters or indicators where there was a clear potential point intervention that could actually move the needle, What the government did was to come up with a well-designed scheme, back it up with the right budget, leverage Aadhaar and DBT wherever applicable, build a tech-enabled monitoring system, build salience around that particular scheme, take a saturation approach, not an incremental coverage approach, but a saturation approach, and then work with the states for execution. That, in nutshell, can be said to be one way of looking at how Government of India approached some of the indicators. And there are many examples of it, right? We have Swachh Bharat, which is toilets for all, Jan Dhan, which is bank accounts for all, Ujjwala, gas cylinders for all, PM Awas, housing for all, and so on and so forth. And on the other side, for those slightly more complex indicators like learning outcomes, where there's no one-point intervention that will get us the outcomes, and there's a combination of things required, or the answers are not very clear, or there's a contextualized local solution that's required, that's where the approach has been almost to set the goal, set the aspiration, define a timeline, back it up with some budget, provide guidelines, and then let the states improvise and innovate. Right? A very good example of it is what you also referred, which is the Nipun Bharat Mission, the National Nipun Bharat Mission, which was launched in 2021 with the aim of getting all our kids till grade 3 to be competent in foundational literacy and numeracy. Now, the mission was announced, the timeline of March of 2027 has been announced. There are certain guidelines, their budget, but it's really up to the states to figure out the how. And states are actually rising to the occasion, right? Uttar Pradesh is one classic example, the largest and the most complex state. We are talking about 110,000 government schools, 400,000 teachers, 4 million kids. And that's a state which has been able to move the needle on learning outcomes. And in the latest ASER survey, the latest National Achievement Survey, all of that is very clearly visible. Another example of that is ease of doing business. Again, the same approach. Set the rules of the game, set the target, set the goal, and let the states kind of do the action. So that's been the macro approach. Now, coming to the 3 themes that I was talking about from this journey, I think the first theme is a theme of a healthy competition amongst the different administrative units, especially the states. So whenever there's been a Government of India push, a Government of India scheme, it spurred a healthy competition in different states. And we do a lot of work with states, we work with chief ministers. And the number of times I've heard CMs talking about, okay, how are we doing vis-a-vis other state and how far are we away from the target? It's just kind of, it's incredible. So I think that's a very positive. You can call it competitive federalism, you can call it kind of healthy competition, but that's been the thing. And that same thing gets cascaded to the district level, to the block level. When state wants outcome, the same spirit of competition amongst the districts and so on and so forth. So that's been one theme. And also Government of India directly, especially through the aspirational district program, where indicators were set for the most kind of backward districts in the country. And one of the 3 pillars of aspirational district program is actually competition. Competition amongst everyone to say who gets to the goal first. So that's, in my mind, one theme, which is healthy competition. The second theme is a whole of society approach. And I think the government is kind of very clearly today believes, not just the Government of India, but state governments, that not everything is possible alone, right? You need to work together with the private sector, with the not-for-profit sector, with the civil society to deliver outcomes. And that gets manifested in multiple ways. One way, of course, to look at it is the India stack, right? You have UPI, and there are all the private sector innovating and building solutions on top of that. You have eKYC, and you see Reliance kind of leveraging eKYC to really kind of fast-track the rollout of Geo across the country. The other ways in which it get manifested is again in the social sector, right? Sticking with the UP example of, let's say, Nipun Bharat, there is a technical partner for literacy, there's a partner for kind of numeracy, there is a communication partner, there's a technology partner, there's an assessment partner, there is someone like us who's kind of tying all of it together with the governments. But the larger thing is this very active collaboration happening between the government and the civil society. And I also see a sea change in the mindset of the social sector organizations, social enterprise and not-for-profit. I remember 13 years back when we were starting Samagra, we said we'll only work with the government. And people like, what? The general mindset was to stay away from the government, right? Because it's too messy, it's too complicated, and it's very difficult to kind of engage with the government, was the general mindset in the social impact sector. But today, that's not the case. Every NGO, every social enterprise wants to work with the government because that's the way you get scale, that's the way you kind of get the maximum out of your innovation and so on and so forth. So that to me is the second theme, which is the whole of society approach. And the third theme is tech innovation. Again, one lens to see how India has kind of done that journey. Phase 1 was building a lot of the horizontal layers which were domain agnostic. You can call it Aadhaar, UPI, eKYC, and so on and so forth. Then there has been a phase 2, which has been underway for 4-5 years now, where you have domain-specific stacks being built, right? So you have the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission for health. You have the National Digital Education Architecture for education. You have ONDC for commerce. You have AgriStack for agriculture. So that's been phase 2. And what both of this has enabled is not just how private sector is leveraging it, which we already talked about, but also how state governments are now innovating on it. And a classical example of that is agriculture in Odisha, where a full stack DPI for agriculture has been built. And we've had a chance to kind of work there along with the Gates Foundation to kind of in that journey over the last 5-7 years. But it's a full stack DPI for agriculture where any government service or any private player who wants to provide services to the small and marginal farmers of the state can leverage that to do it. So that's the kind of innovation it has spurred. Right? So if I were to just summarize 3 things I'm talking about in terms of theme, the first is a spirit of competition amongst different administrative units. The second is a whole of society approach. And third is very unique innovation in tech, which is kind of leading to a lot of outcomes. Yeah.
Thank you. Turning a little bit to some examples from outside India and also some work at the grassroots level. If I can turn to Noella Musunka, who's with Malaika. Did I pronounce that correctly? It's like Malaika? It's easy for us to remember in India because it's the name of a actress. But it's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and her organization works on particularly on education for girls, sanitation, and other grassroots level. How does the SDGs? How would you assess how the SDGs have progressed from your vantage point, and what are some of the challenges that you've seen on the ground?
Morning, everyone. I hope you're well in this busy New York City. First of all, I want to acknowledge I went to India in New Delhi a few months ago, and it was amazing to see the culture, the fast tracking of tech, and how beautiful India is. And we have a special bond with India because a student that studied in Congo at our school for 13 years, 7 of them got full scholarship in Pune at the university. So when I went there, I had the pleasure to speak at ORF, and the student came with me on the panel. I do believe education is very important, more than ever, but you need to have the education that is like the university, the primary, secondary school, but you need to have the option of the vocational training. It's very important to give the skills to the youth to be mechanician, electrician, plumbery, and etc. We cannot just have an elitist education, and that's what we've created with Malaika in the Congo school. And we have created a vocational training. As we are approaching the final 5 years of SDG, I think we came from far, but we have a long way to go. And to achieve these goals, it's very important that we work all together in partnership, the private sector, the government, and the public sectors, and the individuals. I do believe in the strength and the power of individuality and human being to make a change. And we need peace. There's too many conflicts in the world. I come from a conflict country, Congo, more than 30 years of conflict, and it's very sad to see how devastating is it, how many children are out of school worldwide because of all these conflicts. It's important that locally led community-driven models emerge even more to emphasize on the education worldwide. Will transformation happen on the ground level and go all the way up? The cross-sector partnership, like I just said, and to have the national and international level of government is crucial for more development. Education is a tool for empowerment in communities, for girls, for women, but for boys. I'm a mother of a boy and a girl, so my son doesn't want to hear the entire month of March dedicated just to women. He said, Mom, it's important to invest in men and boys. So it's important that we don't forget that, because a society where we don't empower men, they will not respect the woman. It's very important to invest in the training. We're talking about AI, but we don't have enough workforce that is capable to teach and to be able to be facing the revolution of AI. But when you come from rural communities where I set up Malaika, we don't have the infrastructure. You need to have roads, you need to have access to internet, you need to have access to electricity. At our school, we put the solar panel, we push the government to make the roads, but when you put a system of solar panel, you have to maintain the system that you have with the batteries. When you have a classroom of 30 or 40 laptops, how do you charge this laptop? It's an entire organization. So yes, we can go to AI, but there's so many steps behind where undeveloped countries, undeveloped areas don't have access. And to train the teachers, to train the team that you have on the ground, it's very important. Incorporating technology for the development, for the solution, the renewable energy, the technology. And what is very important, I do believe that we need to update all curriculums at every level in any school in the world to prepare our kids, the next generation, to be able to find jobs for the 21st centuries. We need to have special teachings. My daughter is at a new school, we're based in Dubai. She's at a new school of new ways of learning. It's called SRI. And she came back and she said, Mom, I love the way of learning because it's not like you learn and you have to write. You have to be creative. You have to understand and you can use your imagination. And it's how we reimagine the educational system for every country, for every school, but that is adaptable to for children. Someone that is good in tech might not be good in drama and music. We cannot push all our kids only to learn about coding. I think the society needs a diversity and need a diversity of children that will come with their talents. And we have, as the pioneer, trying to understand the talent of each child and the needs and the society. We shouldn't be afraid of AI. We should integrate it in our curriculum and make it available for every children in the world. So SDGs, 5 more years to go. It will only happen if we all work together as government, public, and private sectors.
Thank you. And last but not least, if I can turn to Ayla Bajwa with DP World, and particularly what I think would be interesting to hear from you is the potential role for the private sector, particularly for a large multinational organization such as yours. How do you envision sort of supporting these efforts in development?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, so we see a huge part for the private sector to play when it comes to the SDGs. The reality is only 18% are in progress for the SDGs. We have a $4 trillion approximate gap for financing around the SDGs. And the private sector has influence in all of this. And so to give you a little bit of a background, DP World is a global end-to-end logistics company operating in 70 plus countries and operating 5 container terminals in India and 8 inland rail terminals. And so we believe very strongly. A lot of the messaging was India is going to play a big role in achieving the SDGs if we manage to achieve them. And I absolutely agree with that. And we as DP World absolutely agree with that. And we see the private sector being that engine for economic prosperity, economic productivity, for the employment required for the GDP input and the taxonomy implications around the GDP input. About 30% of the of import movement into India is through our port container terminals. We contribute about 16,000 jobs in India. We ensure that where we operate, we have an action plan for indirect and direct communities that are being affected by our operations, ensuring that we have, whether it's wash facilities, whether it's safety programs around our truckers, we have issued certain financing mechanisms to help propel those that important work, whether it's a $1.5 billion green sukuk for all of you who may or may not be familiar with Islamic finance. Sukuk is sort of the equivalent of a bond. We're headquartered in Dubai, just FYI. And then a $100 million private placement blue bond at the beginning of this year, which included coastal restoration, mangrove restoration, and then also wash facilities. So ensuring, yes, we're looking at sustainable fuels and clean fuels for the shipping industry, but we're also looking at impact. So it's the beauty of the SDGs is its interconnectivity. And we really do see the private sector being that thread in many cases. We work very closely with the government quite naturally because of the nature of our business. We work very closely with communities because of where we operate. And so for us, this is, we use the SDGs in a way as a business strategy. And so our sustainability strategy sits under our business strategy, which is underpinned by the SDGs. I think, yes, there is some negative spirit and feeling around the SDGs and the progress we're that we're making around it. But I think what also we have to remember is whether we accomplish them or not, they've been an excellent tool for monitoring and reporting and understanding progress across populations. My colleague to the left was sharing how the majority of countries are reporting against the SDGs, and so we are aware of that progress. So without that blueprint, we would not have that visibility. And so as the private sector, we're constantly looking at, okay, where are we touching upon it? And then how can we really drive that the global goal 8, that economic productivity, so that then it has a trickle-down effect to everything else from a stakeholder engagement perspective.
Thank you. If I can ask, I think we have about 20 minutes left on the panel. So briefly, I want to also look ahead as well. And we're at a point, as we heard this week, there are many competing priorities. Some of the very questions underpinning the SDGs are being questioned and challenged. But if you were to draw people's attention to one thing that you think we could look at to accelerate the SDGs over the next 5 years, what would it be? And maybe start again with Hemang and we can go down in order.
I think, one thing which we should learn from India perhaps for the rest of the world on SDGs and how to put is on scale and speed, the way which India has tackled the SDGs. But let me also take a moment here. We all know about India's achievements on SDGs and scale and speed, but why is it so? Because if you look at our Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, the SDGs are already embedded in it. When in 2015, Honorable Prime Minister gave a clarion call to all the citizens of India saying that you take 5 resolutions today. And the first resolution out of that was that in 100 years, at 2047, India should become a developed nation. And then he defined the developed nation, India at 2047. And the first was that we should become a 30 trillion economy. Fine, but the rest of the 4 or 5 pillars of Viksit Bharat are all SDGs. We should have housing for all. Everybody should be educated. We should have increased our forest cover by 30%. Everybody should have clean water. Everybody should have job opportunity. Women should have increased job opportunity. So all of the development since 2015 you are seeing on SDGs is because of the Viksit Bharat vision, which goes beyond the economy. So I think that is what one lesson I would leave for the rest of the world, to embed SDGs in their development vision and development journey, as has been done in India. And second, of course, speed and scale. We have lifted 415 million people out of multidimensional poverty in last 10 years. Some 80 crore toilets were built. Some 200 million people have got insurance coverage. So scale and speed at which India is working is, I think, very important, and that is what will matter for SDGs for the rest of the world. Thank you.
I'd say the approach to how we look at financing all of this we've talked about the way the government's operating. Gaurav mentioned when he spoke about the way state governments have sort of embraced the idea of moving forward and seeing how they can operate. And you kindly mentioned the involvement of the private sector. How do you bring all of this together? And how do you do that in sort of rapid time? As we know, India's got this ecosystem where you can do these things at scale. But how do you build an ecosystem that allows the financing of all of this to actually operate and work? And so obviously, I'd say outcomes-based finance is a great idea. But I do believe that really does become a game changer for all of us. Because when you start to say that actually, let's pay for the result rather than the way that all of these activities that need to get there happen, I think you're starting to see that actually the mind becomes very focused. Government, private sector, philanthropists are all coming together to drive real change on scale. And actually, India can then achieve what it needs to achieve to really be a trailblazer for the future in its achievement. So my big thing would be just, how do you finance this effectively and bring those three streams together in an environment that will actually bring scalable change?
Reinforcing definitely the SDG 4, education, good health and well-being, SDG 3, zero hunger, the SDG number 2, and really have more representation of women at every level sectors and give them access to finance, entrepreneurship, and more technology access, and investing in rural communities. I think towns are getting very developed. We need to reach really the underprivileged and the rural communities.
Yeah, I think I'll stick to what India can kind of do over the next 5 years to fast track the journey. Bharat ka rehne wala hu, Bharat ki baat sunata hu. So I think one is the two-part approach that I talked about in terms of point intervention approach as well as more complex outcomes. More of that is required. We are far from done. A lot of things need to be still happen, and therefore just sticking to that I think would be one thing, and fast tracking that. But that's still top down. I think the second thing that's possible over the next 5 years is to really kind of fast track the SDG attainment through a bottom-up approach through collectivization. And that's one space that India has kind of done well in the last few years. So we have the large network of women self-help groups. We have FPOs, we have cooperatives, we have more civic action-oriented collectives, Pani Samitis, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of, you can say, a social infrastructure that exists there which can be leveraged to kind of do more. And what requires to be done there is essentially three things. Some of it we are doing, some of it we are not doing enough. One is institutionalization. It's not just enough to have collectives at a village level, but it's important to kind of get them federated at a cluster level, at a block level, and so on. So that lends more weight and more kind of capability to do things. So that's one thing that's needed. The second is a huge effort on capacity building of the collectives. I think both on the digital front as well as on the kind of general business governance front, there's I think almost a mission mode effort required on capacity building of collectives so that they can realize their true potential. And the third one is integration. Integration of collectives. So for example, if you talk about women self-help groups, right now the common kind of this thing is that you have social kind of capital build, then you have savings, you have investment, you do some livelihood activity. But I think the more and more we can integrate them with government service delivery, midday meals, uniforms in schools, scheme delivery on the ground. It's not that I'm not talking about something new, it's already happening in pockets. But if we can scale that up, I think that'll really lend weight to women self-help groups. And similarly on the FPO front, integrating them with the value chains. They're aggregating supply. But if they have to we have to get them to meet the demand and the market integration there is required. So I think three themes of institutionalization, capacity building, and integration. If that's done for collectives across the board, I'll give another fillip to India's journey to SDGs.
So I wouldn't underestimate the role of the South-South routes that are coming up, and the South-South collaborations in global trade, and it will have a huge and India has a huge role to play in that, and not only has a huge role, has already demonstrated some very strong case studies. One of the examples that come to mind is this collaboration that we've launched with Bharat Africa Setu. It's a collaboration to enhance the trade routes between Africa and India. And we're seeing this more as a contributor to the local economy and sort of feeding into the governance structures and the systems that you're talking about. And then, of course, building the bridge when it comes to finance, especially if we can look at those collaborations where you de-risk for the private sector, right? De-risking becomes really important from a private sector. It makes my conversations with corporate finance a little easier. And so I would not I think there, again, some case studies that I find really interesting is the vaccine diplomacy and the role of vaccine distribution that India played. I mean, it was phenomenal. And there's so much more. Yesterday, I was part of a conversation about decarbonization of shipping and the fuels and the clean fuels that will be required in the future to ensure that we are meeting sort of these IMO regulations coming up. The natural resources, the kind of production, the kind of manufacturing, the kind of scale India can do in that space is very exciting for the future. And that is what's going to achieve the SDGs. And so we may not make it to 2030, but the work does not stop at 2030. The work continues. And India will continue to be a pivotal part of the progress that's made beyond 2030. So I leave it with that.
If I can just ask a quick follow-up, because you mentioned the Bharat-Africa Setu, which is a bridge, India-Africa bridge. And we heard a few examples from the Consul General about Tanzania earlier. We heard about from the Congo, from Noella, about scholarships of students from Congo coming to India, to Pune. Do you see a role for DP World both in the hard connectivity there, but also the soft connectivity? Or do you, and could you speak a little bit about that?
So we see absolutely both the hard connectivity, which is the examples that I've just provided, and the soft connectivity in terms of exchange as well, right? So we have colleagues working all over the world. And so we create exchange for that upskilling aspect of things. So for example, in Tanzania, yes, we have, so we run the port in Dar es Salaam. And so we have mostly hired local nationals, but we have also brought colleagues from abroad to sort of upskill, and we do that wherever we have a concession to upskill the local, the local employment so that it can grow as these borders open up. And so that's really critical for us, that during this cross-pollination, the local communities, local employment, and the people of that country continue to grow. For example, even as we move to green economies, if we move towards digitalization, if we move to automation, how do we bring everyone along on that journey? And then, of course, not forgetting women in that journey, which has been brought up a couple of times.
We have 5 more minutes, so I just want to give a quick opportunity, I think, for the other panelists as well, just because you started this. Part of the sort of discussion items on this panel was on South-South cooperation, and you provided some good examples of that. But maybe if all of you could give, just given the fact that we had a meeting yesterday that India chaired on a group of like-minded countries in the Global South, which was quite diverse in its participation. You had GCC countries that are quite highly developed, countries in the small Caribbean island countries, large countries in Southeast Asia, and all driven together by a sort of shared purpose in a few areas, which is broader institutional reform, security, energy, food, health security, and climate justice and adaptation. And those are some of the items, I think, that where there was a sort of shared purpose. But maybe if all of you could, just given your different backgrounds, give maybe 1 or 2 examples of where you see opportunities for South-South collaboration quickly. Maybe start with Hemang again.
I think I'll draw from what I was doing before the World Bank. Almost all the South countries, 100 odd countries, out of which around 50-55 are the Commonwealth. And we share a very unique lineage of our bureaucracy, right? All of us have Mandarin type bureaucracy. And one of the most important, which Gaurav also mentioned, aspect to achieving SDGs is building capacity of our people, public servants who deliver. So there is a huge opportunity for collaboration amongst the Global South. How do you build that capacity, learn from each other? And now India has a world's largest civil service capacity building platform under Mission Karma Yogi called Integrated Government Online Training Platform. we have also started offering it to many countries. Many countries from Africa particularly have shown interest, and they are already working on creating. It is a completely open source, another DPI that we are adding to the list of our DPIs. So I think there is a huge opportunity. Capacity building is a word where the actual person who delivers the services always gets missing. So that I think is one thing which we should promote in South-South cooperation.
I'd say from some of our experiences, a lot of the work around climate and conservation, we've seen lots of sort of small island nation cooperation come together. And actually, India's been quite a leader in helping and supporting those nations in that way. And the learning development that can actually come from that has actually been quite powerful. We're seeing real homegrown solutions to some of those large problems. So we have a climate innovation fund where we fund homegrown organizations who are able to make a difference on the ground in their countries, and actually seeing those develop, the learning outcomes from those going to other nations has been quite powerful. And I think there's more of that especially in that particular space, because I think everyone's on a learning journey around that. How do you make a difference at a local level and actually see how you can empower and capacity build those people on the ground?
Noella?
I totally agree. I think the capacity building is very important, the building skill force, address the social inequalities, and really have the mindset that to be adaptive in the society that is fast growing and fast changing.
I would say many areas actually, but one area which I touched upon earlier is just improvement in learning outcomes. I think if Uttar Pradesh can move the needle, the most complex place, its massive size in the last kind of 3 odd years, then I think any part of the world can do that. And there is a playbook, there's a certain method to them, there's a use of technology involved in that. And I think those are learnings that can be taken to the global south. In fact, yesterday I was taking a kind of, with a professor at Harvard of public policy, taking a class on the case study of Uttar Pradesh learning outcome improvement. And there were like students from all across the world, a lot of the global south countries, and they could see the similarities in their kind of situations and how this can be adapted. Yeah.
Just on that, is there capacity at the UP state level, the UP government, to actually share some of those lessons learned with other countries?
Yeah, I think definitely the lessons can be kind of shared. That's not difficult at all. But of course, there is then action required, and then that requires kind of the right partners there and so on and so forth, which is a more kind of complex part. But yeah, learnings can easily be shared.
With that, please join me in thanking the panel for a very wide-ranging and energetic discussion. And I think I'll turn it back to Shubh for the next sessions. Please join me in thanking the panel.